I just had one quick thing for the agenda. Matt pointed out to me after our call last week that we should also have ratified the code of conduct. Given that nobody has had any comments on the code of conduct, I would assume that that means that everybody's fine with it. So we should just ratify that. So any last comments before we actually take a vote on the code of conduct? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And I think it's unanimous. Cool. We will push that to production also. All right, that's all I had. Oh, I should also note actually that the terms of use have been officially updated. And we now have open source appropriate terms of use on our website. So that's been a long time coming, but that is done. And I think we're about a week and a half or so away from having a new improved front end and user experience. So we'll give a little bit of thought to kind of making a little bit of noise about that too from an outbound perspective. But yeah, so things are moving along.
Great.
Good.
That's good. So the we're almost official.
No. Taking a little while, but we'll get there.
So we don't have I don't have a lot. I'm mainly just working on helping the folks at Ansible so that they can translate their lessons over to our platform from their existing repository. We'll see how that pans out. In fact, it's the majority of what I've done for this project in the last few weeks is trying to help people develop lessons for the project with varying degrees of success. Stephen, actually, now that you're on the phone, this is I'm glad you dialed in. We need to find a way to include or I should say we should update the docs for people who are like, I run Linux and I have an Intel CPU, and that means that VirtualBox doesn't support VT, and running a lesson, like I have a pretty beefy box and it's still really slow.
Okay.
Way too slow. And so running Linux with an Intel CPU makes Vagrant, makes VirtualBox not viable for me. So we need, they're now in I run Ubuntu, and I believe there's also packages in CentOS to install the support needed for KVM. Because there's actually a command you can run, vagrant plugin install libvirt vagrant or whatever, but unfortunately that's broken right now. It's broken on every Linux platform, and it's I don't know how or when that's going to get resolved. But if you go to the GitHub repository for it, it's like not in a good. It's broken. That's the bottom line there. But somebody has made packages native to like the installable via yum or apt, so that you don't that just installs it anyways, so that you don't have to worry about that problem that they're dealing with. And that allows someone like me to run self-medicate on my box, and with reasonable performance. So we should update the docs on how to install that support, and then also update our Vagrant script to include support for that. And as you know, the bento box doesn't support KVM.
Correct. So there's a a new box that Olivier pointed me towards, the generic Ubuntu 1804, which I'm testing now. Olivier responded on he has a libvirt vagrant provider issue, or I guess he has it working in his own repository, and all he had to do was change the provider inside the antidote config from VirtualBox to libvirt, and that was all he needed to get it working.
Yeah,
so I don't know about the plugin you're talking about. Yeah.
So his just changing that on my box does not work. By default, Vagrant no longer, if you go to the Vagrant documentation, it no longer supports KVM. You have to install.
What about so it doesn't support libvirt either?
No, it doesn't support libvirt, QEMU, KVM, but there is a plugin that's being maintained. And that's what I was referring to. Like when I tried to do what he put in that PR, it didn't work for me.
Okay. If so I don't have a Linux machine to test anything on, so I'll need some assistance on that.
Okay, I can also work. I mean, I can also work on it. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. I'm having some. So I too am having issues trying to get Hyper-V to work. So I rolled back to Vagrant, but I installed the newer version of Vagrant in VirtualBox, and now I can't even get VirtualBox to work with the latest version of Vagrant. So I don't know if it's my VirtualBox is too old or Vagrant's too new. Yeah, I understand the issues. I'll see what I can do and read up on Vagrant's documentation for libvirt.
Yeah, I'll here, I'm gonna post a link in chat to the.
Thanks.
That's where the plugin is stored. It is actively being maintained, but there hasn't been a release for over a year.
And it just broke in the newest version, I guess.
You mean of Vagrant? You mean? No, Vagrant. Yeah. There's a here. Let me put Vagrant support in starting in. It was like Vagrant. It's like Vagrant 1.8 or something. libvirt, the libvirt is no longer part of the core repository.
Okay.
So that's and so if you go, I mean, if you go to the most recent read the docs for Vagrant.
Yeah, I don't see it. It just references custom provider, like creating a custom provider. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way, if you read the docs on that GitHub page, is if you go down there and it says for installation, you right, it leads you down to a line that says Vagrant plugin install Vagrant libvirt. It won't work. Even if you follow all the directions that are on the GitHub page, it'll blow up if you try to do that. So at least it does for me. It doesn't. It just comes back with some really generic Ruby errors that are meaningless. but then when you do, I was looking, and there's a package that somebody is maintaining that has this Vagrant libvirt plugin, and it's up to date, and you can just do an APD install. And I think the same thing. There was also a Yum. Oh no. There's also a Yum package on CentOS.
Okay. Yeah, send me that. I'll update the documentation about a libvirt and check with Olivier to see if he has see what his issues or experiences are on that.
All right. Yeah, if he's using an older version of Vagrant, then it could, or maybe he's already has the package installed, right? Then it'll
Right.
work. That is all I really had for the time being. Stephen, do you have anything you'd like to talk about?
Not really. I wasn't able to test the IP changes or the host name changes that Matt suggested last week with doing an asterisk because of my Vagrant VirtualBox issues. And I have come to the conclusion that Vagrant Hyper-V is not really supported for what we want to do with it. Lots of issues.
What do you mean? Hello? Oh, you went on mute.
Sorry about that. I got dropped. I don't know what was last heard, but I'm still working on the changes that Olivier suggested for Vagrant in this antidote self-medicate.
But so what were the issues with Hyper-V you were running into?
Okay. So Vagrant does not support Hyper-V networking out of the box. So you need to set up your own network interface. And the network interface type of NAT is not supported either. And I was having issues with trying to pull in the IPv4 address and instead getting an IPv6 address, which then the machine could not use, so it could never get into the box. And looking at the Vagrant repository, there's been some people that have committed support for Hyper-V, but it looks like or started to commit support, but that was years ago and got dropped.
All right. Well then, maybe Hyper-V is not going to work.
Yeah, doesn't look like it. So I'm going back to, VirtualBox works for most of the images, just not the full Junos images.
It's worth
They're not
noting
Hyper-V. Yeah. Sorry.
that the issue we were having with the libvirt KVM plugin is going to go away. If you go to the VirtualBox site and you look at the like the change logs and stuff, they're very slowly adding in all of the things necessary to support Intel virtualization.
Yep, I noticed that's on their backlog. They didn't assign a date to it, but yes.
Yeah, if you look at the if you go to the this is not their change log. It's not their change log. It's their public they have a subversion repository, and if you look at the description of the changes, like half of all the changes that are going in right now are related to Intel virtualization. So hopefully they you know, hopefully they resolve that. And that'll make it a lot easier for people.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, then Lisa, you're good.
I'm good.
Yep. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining the call, Stephen and Lisa, and we'll see you next week.
All right, sounds good.
Welcome.
Right.
See you next week.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.